I'm going to preface this section by saying that next week we will be talking about intensive behaviors. So you're going, as we talk about correcting problem behavior, you're going to feel like saying, but what about when, what if they don't respond? What if they don't, what if they do escalate? We're going to pretend in all of the scenarios that we're going to talk about in the next few minutes that they are responding to you in a positive way and that it is working. Because next week we're going to focus on what if. Because there's a lot of what ifs and you deal with them every day. It's emotional. You're there. You're ready to talk about them. But in order to learn the proper techniques for the corrective teaching we're teaching, it's best to have the kids actually agree with you and do it the way you want to. So when we get to the part where one of you is being the little stinker and one of you is being the teacher, you're going to comply. You're going to follow the script and you're not going to do whatever your child did to you today. You will have plenty of time to do that next week and it will be so much fun. But that's just not going to happen right now. So let's go ahead and look at the objectives. And you'll find these in your books. We're on page 77 if you're not already there.
No,
Are you supposed to write it?
I'm filling out for Corey.
You are working ahead. Okay, so we know the kids are, you're going to do wonderful proactive teaching. You're going to praise them. You're going to do everything correctly. The kids are still going to misbehave.
Sorry.
No. That's why I was walking that direction.
Okay.
Kids are still going to misbehave. Have they already seen this slide? Are we rehashing this?
Something similar, but they haven't seen
Okay.
exactly this one.
So when we look at the well-managed school model versus the traditional behavior management model, well-managed schools, we try to spend a lot of time at the beginning being proactive. Whether it's the beginning of the year or the end of the year, if the skill is something new that you're teaching them, or if it's exceptionally difficult, we've been trying all year, you're still going to spend a whole lot of front-loading time being proactive, and you're going to specifically praise them for what they're doing, maybe even effectively, depending on how difficult it is for them. When you can do that, chances are you will have less correction, and that means the child will have less time away from the classroom, and when they're in the classroom, they're going to get what they need. And so the whole idea is to try to keep them in the classroom. With the traditional behavior management, there is, everybody's a little bit proactive, but probably not as proactive as they could be.
Maybe just at the beginning of the year.
Yeah, and we kind of think, okay, we're going to spend the first 3 weeks doing this, and then you're done. Praise is there, but praise is, that's something at our school that we are really putting on the forefront for these next 2 months, because you know what it's like going from April to May. The kids are getting tired, the kids are done, the teachers get tired, the teachers are done, and it's a lot harder to be here, but the rewards are huge when you're able to do that. When you don't have enough proactive and praise, you tend to have more correction, probably not as effective correction, and then it can still lead to time away. And there's still going to be time away, but we want the time away to be minimal instead of the maximum that it can be. So let's look at the conflict cycle again. Okay, so the conflict cycle, you talked about, you have somewhere where you talked about what the
It's over there under the clock what the cycles of behavior look like on the.
Oh, okay, good. So with the cycles, you know that even though these are the little ones, if a child's repeating them over and over and over, little can become big. And the way we react to this happening for the 565th time also can, our reaction to the child influences their reaction. And our goal, of course, is to try to keep cycle 1 behaviors in cycle 1 or stopped, so they don't have to progress into bigger cycle behaviors. And we are looking again at what our children, what they're used to hearing versus what you're getting. And if it's a disconnected child, they're used to hearing the really severe things before they're going to stop. We kind of need to redirect them to, that's not what we're going to do. That's not how you're going to be treated. This is the skill we expect. We're doing a great job trying. We're gonna keep at it until you get there. So think about, though, the cycle 1 behaviors. Think about how you respond to those behaviors. What are some things you do? Emily, do you mind being the... So we have a little continuum of correction. I want you to think about the title, or the cycle 1 behaviors. I want you to think about when they're giving you this, or when they come in without their pencil for the 500th time. When they're looking over here and you want them looking over there. When they're giggling with their friend. What are some corrections that you use now that you find successful, not successful? What do you tend to do if somebody's doing that?
Well, I just wanted to say, I'll answer the question, that to me, cycle 1 is not necessarily just the behavior, right? There's an event that triggers behavior change in a child, right? It says there's going to be feelings and anxieties and some stressful event that causes behavior change. So the answer is, anytime you notice a child's behavior change from what is normal, that's an indication that something's up, and you're in cycle 1. That's a point where you want to intervene, because it's easier to intervene there than it is when they get up.
Because we want to keep
Right.
it small.
So
what are some
it
of
could
those?
be,
So what
you
are you
know,
gonna
like
do?
biting fingernails or rocking or.
But what is your
What's your response?
Okay, I'm gonna
That's what we're
just
asking.
by
What is
simply
your
saying their
response?
names.
Empathy.
Yep.
Eye contact.
Praise the ones that are on task.
Might give them a signal.
So I'm hearing verbal, I'm hearing nonverbal.
Proximity.
Proximity. Maybe I'll hand on
But I have them. Little table,
so you're more likely to go.
I
Been there,
Did someone say
just today.
praise?
Yeah, oh yeah.
Yeah, but they're praising the people who are around them, so
Praising.
if you're sitting here, do something annoying.
Pick your nose, Eric, that's a common one. Not really.
I
but-
usually
Maddie, you're
tap it,
doing such a nice job of keeping your hands quiet, it's not distracting other people, I really appreciate when you can do that.
but I think finding
Look,
something
you
to
know
praise
what,
in
and
the
you just did
individual.
the same thing, nice job. Well, you can't praise you for doing what you were doing.
No, for something else.
True, but you're trying, what's the goal?
To interchange
I like
the
How you're
behavior.
not eating your
Trying
boogers.
to- Although, I do think you need to be careful with praising others is a great thing, but you want to be sure that it doesn't become punitive to the person who's not even aware of what they're doing. So in your kind of thing, just a quiet little proximity probably would work before.
And Eric, I get what you're saying, you know, if you're picking your nose, I can say, Eric, I really like how you're in your seat. You know, it brings the attention to that student, so I'm praising them for something that they are doing, so they may
And for nose pickers, sometimes I just kind
just stick with next.
Those triggers get no empathy from me. I just a signal to walk.
well, then it
I
would
just-
probably be,
When you're
here
done.
you go,
You
Make
know.
eye contact and this little shake.
and then you can praise them for following your instructions.
Yay.
And for the
Alright,
size
so
of
when-
the boot.
So we're looking at it, basically, we're looking here at the continuum
Oh, I
correction.
wonder what that had to do
You
with
start
it.
small, you start nonverbal, and it may need to grow. So what's gonna come next? So we've got,
As the behavior gets a little more intense.
so what might you do? Because then they're gonna start becoming aware. At first, it's behavior that they might not even be aware they're doing. They're not aware that,
Then you might have to review one of our skills.
Remove the audience. Or can,
What do you
so we
mean by that?
send the kids out in the hall?
well, you can remove the audience lots of different ways, including your own attention in a way that's not
Aha.
gonna reinforce
Ignore.
the behavior. You can use
So ignore.
ignoring, or you could use a spontaneous transition, or anything to remove the attention from the individual, whether from your classmates or from you, so that
But-
you can address it quietly, privately, and not escalate.
And ignoring
you're-
is one of the, you're correct, and ignoring is one of the smallest little corrections. You can very consciously ignore behavior.
So I put those in 3 different spots. Ignoring is really the lowest level of correction. And if it doesn't work, you should move up quickly, but it's a strategy for sure. And then, reteaching, or I put a transition in here, so if transitioning the class would take the audience away from that student, then that would be kind of in the middle. And then I think like removing the audience, I mean, Maddie has had to, now the kids are gonna leave, you know, I mean, and that's just higher up
Talking
on.
about cycle 1 behaviors.
We're right on
It's-
2 right now,
So-
so that's why I moved
Yeah,
this.
as we're moving, we
farther
are kind of growing, now they're becoming more aware, for whatever's going on inside their brains, they are trying to then either distract you or distract.
So responding to the cycle 2 behaviors, talking back, rolling their eyes, shutting down, inappropriate language, what are we saying, how are we correcting that?
And to
Having a
clarify,
conversation.
removing the
yeah.
audience doesn't mean removing the kids. It
I
means
was
that
kind of
the
teasing.
child is engaging in some
Right.
kind of attention-seeking
Yeah.
behavior, and the appropriate response is to not give attention to it.
Right.
Right. Yep, and yeah, I think we identified 3 ways we can do
But
that.
if that's not stopping the behavior, and remember, the kids are also watching to see how you respond to this behavior as well, because that is very interesting to them. We'll get more to that later. So your cycle 2, what are some other things that we can do? It's starting to become verbal.
Have like a discussion or explanation of why that's not the best option. So I'm looking at the distracting others, and you can have a discussion with them
Yep.
about what kind of impact that's
So
having.
it's time to have a conversation.
Or redirect.
Now, and if you can, keep it close, keep it private, so,
Yeah.
you're saving their, how they're
Mhm,
feeling.
So private conversation, redirecting. So now the kids are, now the student is throwing something. Now as we move up, into cycle 3. What happens then?
That makes sense.
They're throwing something, but they are not throwing, they're not hurting anyone.
What could they possibly earn too if the behavior continues to escalate? What could you tell them that they could possibly earn if the behavior continues to escalate?
Lots of reason. I
Valid.
like giving like a choice kind of. You're gonna choose to do what we're doing here, or a consequence for not
Mhm.
choosing to
I
be
like that.
safe or connecting it to
Right.
some type of school, or if you're not choosing to be safe, you will not come outside with us.
And if it continues
Stay.
or if it escalates,
And the end
eventually,
of the line
what are they
is,
gonna earn?
Yeah.
And you're allowed to mention that that's a possibility.
and a referral
Earlier
warning is don't ever give it
Right.
unless you're ready to give it. I mean,
Right.
but
Know that that is something that could happen if they don't reduce their behavior.
So that's kind of a continuum from little behaviors to big behaviors, kind of how some corrections we already have in our tool belt now.
So looking at what you did and putting it into these words, so you start with ignoring is the very lowest, office referral at the top. So we ignore, then we start using some proximity, any kind of nonverbal prompts that you may have. Now, some nonverbal prompts are ones that we use all the time. You can also, with particular children who tend to have more difficulty with this, you can kind of work with a little a personal prompt. I
Personal
know that you
signal.
have trouble, a little, thank you, signal. I know you have trouble with not tapping your pencil, so when I notice that you're doing that, I'm just gonna do this. Or I had a child a million years ago that used to suck his thumb, and I just used to do this to get him to, and his mom still says, thank you so much for stopping my child. He's grown and has a child now.
And I remember one of the kids had to pick their signal, and it was either Jean or Becky, and they're like, could you pull on, they're like, how about I pull on my ear? They're like, could you pull on both ears? And
So
then
she
each
pulls
one
on
like,
both the fire.
no. Because it was like,
Wasn't that Hayden and Corey?
So
did
again-
Hayden do that?
He kept wanting to change it.
That might have been.
So
Yeah, maybe
it
was.
can be a personal signal. But then we move up and then we start looking at our corrective strategies, and a verbal prompt is a corrective strategy. As we go up, we get more to a guided self-correction that we'll be talking about in a little bit. The guided self-correction is when you're giving the child leading questions about their behavior, and they're telling you what they are doing and what they should be doing instead and how they could do that. And then we move up to needing to do a corrective teaching, and that's when you're noticing this kid does not have the skill that I need them to have, and so I need to teach a replacement skill. Because right now, every time they wanna give me the answer, they just blurt it out. Obviously, they don't know how to get my attention. So, when it's in correction form, it's not a planned teaching anymore, but now it's a corrective teaching. And this corrective teaching is gonna be all centered around, getting the teacher's attention. And now the child may be doing several different things at once. You're gonna pick the thing that might have the most impact, because you're not gonna address all of them at once. And a lot of time blurting out might be one of those things. And then eventually office referral, but our goal, of course, is to try to keep them in the classroom. But as soon as you're not able to teach, your class is not safe, there's times when office referral just has to be one of those choices. Any questions about the continuum of correction? Okay, so when we're addressing the inappropriate behavior, we have 3 things that we need to manage. And they're all interwoven because usually you're managing these things simultaneously to make sure that everybody in the situation is safe. So we have to manage ourselves, and like I said earlier, even though a lot of these strategies are not new, they're something similar that we've all been doing, but they're packaged in such a way with this that it really helped to manage myself and ease that frustration that I was feeling with some of the kids. So I didn't have that feeling of the sarcasm that sometimes comes out when you're tired, or you're really frustrated with that one child, or just the losing control, or thinking it's about yourself, because remember, it's never about you.
And I think about in correction, I never actually explicitly considered managing myself as part of correcting students.
And that's been, it's huge. We're not gonna talk about managing ourselves all together yet. We're getting there. I always, even if you're not around, I talk about you and I talk about managing yourself, because I love how you do it. But, basically, just quickly, when you're managing the learning, you're using the strategies that we listed on the continuum of correction, and you're providing the skill teaching like you do proactively, and the goal is to keep the kids in class. That's ultimately the goal. Managing ourselves, you're using the corrective strategies that you're going to learn, you're remaining calm, and again, you're trying to keep the student in the classroom. And when you are managing the environment, you need to remember that safety of everybody is the #1 issue. And when we talk about a lot of the behaviors that we talk about, some things are just immediate office referrals. You've talked about that. If it's immediately dangerous to the class, everything you're doing, that you stop and you call for help. You have to stay in control yourself, and then come to an agreement on what an office referral is and what your school has decided that this is the line. They do this, I've got to call for help right away. So the first thing we're going to talk about is managing the learning. So when we manage the learning, the first thing you look at is modeling. Why do you think modeling is up there? Anybody? If we're going to be teaching and kids are going to have behaviors, what are the other kids going to be doing during that time? Especially if it's something that distracts you from what you're teaching. Where are they going to be looking?
At you.
They're going to be looking at me, because they're, first of all, they know what that kid's doing. And they're like, whew, what's she going to do? And they also, if you're able to stay calm and in control, that's a great example if they're not used to having people stay calm and in control in situations like this. And for some kids that aren't used to calm controlness, somebody else misbehaving in a scary way can immediately be stressful and scary for them. So you are that calming force. You're the first step in keeping that environment safe emotionally for them as well as physically. We're going to be talking about corrective prompts. Corrective prompts are just those things that are really quick and fast for redirecting behavior. It's, it can just be,
Hands to yourself.
what should you be doing? Can you do that? Okay. Just the things we do every day. You're just looking at them, just little quick things to get behavior back where they need to go. And corrective strategies. Well-managed schools has a list of corrective strategies that can be used within a corrective teaching. It can be used independently as corrective prompts. They can be used interchangeably or, one after the other. I think it's the next, yeah, because then we come back. So these are our corrective strategies, and you've seen these. These are not new, especially the very first one. The very first one is cool down time. Sometimes that's just what they need. If they're not reacting to a prompt, if they're starting to escalate a little bit, they might just need a little time. You might just go up to them and say, they might not be ready to talk to you or they're not reacting. So you just say, okay, I'm going to give you a little time to cool down. And then they might be ready for the conversation when you get back. The thing to remember about cool down time is that they always need a task and they need a specified amount of time. So you might want to say, you know what, I'm just going to give you a few minutes to cool down. Why don't you take 3 deep breaths, count to 10, and then I'm going to come back and we'll talk about that. So as long as they need to know when you're coming back and that you are coming back. And the task can be something that maybe you've already worked at. Maybe you've worked out with them before because they tend to get frustrated easily. It might be deep breaths. It might be holding onto the side of your chair and pull real hard and then relax. And then pull real hard, anything that's kind of taking away some physical tension. It might just be counting, which sounds like something, that everybody says, but anything to kind of get their mind off of what's frustrating them. And then come back and have that conversation. Then we have reality statements. Reality statements, reasons that they might want to modify their behavior. As we said with encouraging positive behavior, when you give a reason, it needs to be important to the child. They couldn't care less how you feel. They don't want to hear about how you feel. And if you use yourself as a reason, that might be the perfect reason not to comply. It's really difficult, but try to keep the I out of it. So it could be, the sooner you get started, the more time you'll have at recess, or the less homework you might have. Is this getting you what you want? Just anything that leads them to the reality of what they're doing. Where are my realities? I had a few more. If you continue to thumb through your book, you might not hear the instructions clearly. Or if you continue to talk, you might not hear the instructions. If you look out the window, you could miss an opportunity to participate. Now, maybe somebody doesn't want to participate. That's not the one that you would choose for them. But you know them. You know them better than anybody else. What is something that would be important to them? But to say, I need you to, which I still fight. I still have trouble saying it. I still find that coming out of my mouth. But to say that to them may not be the thing, because they don't care at this point about you, especially the more disconnected kid.
The I need you to or the I need you to or the would you. Would you do this? And it's when we're asking kids to do things, it shouldn't be a question and it shouldn't be based on us,
Right.
but just the direction is.
Now, you know
This.
that you have kids in the class that would be more than happy to behave because you say, I need you to, or would you do this? Because they're pleasers, they are already connected, and they've already learned all of this. So a lot of what we're talking about, and all kids have troubles at some point, but a lot of what we're talking about is focusing on that disconnected kid that hasn't had the opportunity, they're used to fighting for everything. So they're going to continue that fight. And they found, a lot of the students have found, that through their previous experience, to get what they want is to be manipulative, to be mean, to just keep harping about it until somebody gives in. They've learned that works. And so, as frustrating as that's going to be for you, we need to show them that with you, that's not going to work, and you're going to stay calm and you're not going to give in. That's really hard. But they only need to learn that once. But if we give in, then we're back at square one and kind of have to go back. But they need to find that you can, they're trying to meet their needs, and when you can meet their needs and they realize it and it's safe, things just get better. Okay, then we've got empathy. Empathy, oftentimes, unless somebody's kind of getting out of control, empathy is one of the first things that I do. Just validating their feelings. You might not like what they're doing, but that you can validate how they feel. I know this is frustrating. You don't want to do this right now, you're tired, I know how that feels. Let yourself do it. Then you go in, but just that little bit of empathy might be just enough to kind of get them to relax a little bit and at least listen to you.
Mhm. Empathy and then a reason are often so effective. You know.
Did you raise your hand or were you just?
Sorry, Diane.
Oh, it was just reaching.
Okay. And then specific praise. There are so many times that when you're doing a correction that you can praise them. One of the things that kids often don't want to do is look at you. And one of the first things, now this is if looking at you is comfortable. For some kids, looking at you is never comfortable, I get that. But a lot of times I'll just go down and say, will you look at me? Thanks for looking at me, you did that right away. That's immediate positive feedback. And so that kind of, and then I could go right into the empathy thing, and then I could go into a reality statement, and they're ready to work, sometimes. And then the last thing that we have are coupling statements. Coupling statements are, we can go ahead and go to the next page screen because I have one. Coupling statements are two opposing behaviors. They can't do both of them at the same time. And what you're doing is just pointing them out. So if you're looking away, a better idea would be to look at me. So you can tell them what they're doing that you don't want, and then you tell them what you do want. And that way, you know, they might not even be that aware of really what they're doing, because usually they're like, oh, there's so many things. You know, your arms are up here, and you just relax them. And so with coupling statements, they're talking about the specific behaviors that are opposed to each other. So they say you need to be brief with it, be really specific, say one behavior at a time. And so if a lot of behaviors are going on, pick the one that's right out there that's bothering you the most. And don't describe the absence of behavior. So you're talking, please be quiet. You're pacing, a better choice would be to stand still, please. Instead of yelling, try lowering your voice. So these are called coupling statements, and they're wonderful. They are wonderful. I love them. Any questions about the any of the corrective strategies? You're going to be seeing them again. They are what we use and that we'll be talking about on Tuesday when we start talking about escalating intense behavior. And they're also just a quick prompt that you can use at any time. Questions, comments? Everybody loves it. Okay. Let's move on to guided self-correction. We are moving right along.
We
We're
are.
moving along too fast.
Yeah, I don't think so. How is everyone feeling? Does anybody need
Is
a break?
everybody overwhelmed? Do you want to go to the bathroom?
Bathroom break?
Just get it done, then you can have a little bit time bigger. That'd be amazing.
That would be amazing.
Okay, I won't promise anything we can't deliver yet.
Callie wants to leave early.
She got her cue early tonight. Did you tell her no means no?
So
She's
guided,
always proud of me.
Guided self-correction is a problem-solving approach to teaching a replacement skill. It allows the students to be more active participants. You're kind of guiding them through. You're more likely to use this with a skill that they're familiar with, not one that's brand new. And it increases the likelihood that the student will solve the problem in the future before you have to help them solve it. So, you start with talking about what just happened, and instead of you specifically describing the behavior, you're saying, what did you do? And they tell you because they know. What should you have done instead? They know exactly, and when they're used to talking the skills, they'll probably actually say the skill. And they give the reason why it's important. And then you say, okay, remember, try it like that next time. Or you might even want to practice it. We talk about practice a lot with the corrected teaching, but in some situations, practicing during a guided self-correction is perfectly appropriate. For example, if they what's a good one? I don't, if they just did something incorrectly in the process of turning something in or something like that, and if you can say, instead of try it like that, next time, I'm gonna get this back to you, and this time when you hand it to me, let's see if you can hand it to me politely. That same not the steps person had a terrible time handing me anything, or taking anything. He was always like, rah. And so literally one of his skills was, look at me, put out your hand, take it nicely, say thank you. And oh my goodness, we worked on that every day. And so eventually he could go through with a guided self-correction, and then we would just do it over again as a practice. So, okay, and I think we have some videos of some guided self-correction. So look to see what the skill the student's discussing with the student.
Hey, Jay. Your inappropriate word choice. What would be a better word to use next time?
Not right.
Not right, or you changed it right away. What did you say after that?
Not right.
Not right. Thank you for changing it. I appreciate it. Thanks.
Okay, so what was she correcting? Her word choice. And I noticed she had a smile the whole entire time. In fact, she was kind of laughing along with him, but it sounds like he had made his correction even beforehand, but she wanted to make sure she had that.
James, he's probably a pretty skilled kid,
He's heard that a lot too.
you know.
And they've had this conversation before. Okay, next.
Any questions on what we did today about this test? Okay, I think you did an excellent job, everybody. We will see you tomorrow. Please make sure you're dressed so we can get everybody taken care of. I'm going to have my class, which is rows 1 and 2, go and line up on the inside with Mr. DeLorme, inside part of the hallway. And I'm going to ask for Mr. DeLorme's class. The 2 young ladies I need to see, would you please stay seated? Okay, I'm going to ask for the rest of you, you're all Mr. DeLorme's class, to go on the outside of the hallway, lined up please quietly and in line. Thank you, nice job today. Even dealing with the fire drill and the squeaky sneakers. Crystal, can you come on here for a second? All right, we need to talk about a little bit what happened here when we were doing these sit-ups. What were you doing? What were you doing?
No, because I couldn't do it, and I thought I was just laughing. I'm sorry.
Okay, Crystal, you were talking as well. What's wrong? She was cracking you up. Well, what should you have been doing?
You should have been quiet.
Okay, and what happens when you were being nice and talkative like that, when we've got 30 girls trying to do this and you two are talking? What's
trying to be distracted.
It's going to be distracted. What do you think that's going to do to their effort on the test? They're probably going to mess up and won't do as well. So what might you be able to do tomorrow that will prevent this when we do take this test?
Be quiet.
Okay, be quiet. And you know what? If you two get along so well that you find yourselves kind of giggling out, you might want to find a different partner. Okay, but that's up to you as long as you can be quiet. Okay? All right, thank you. Okay, we'll see you tomorrow. Okay? Thank you very much for your cooperation there.
Okay, so what skill was he encouraging, or kind of?
Staying on task, kind of.
Yeah, and these are probably some pretty connected kids, because what was his reasoning behind? Kind of, he shifted the focus broader than just themselves.
The whole class.
Actually caring about what the whole class.
It was that benefit to others that when we talked about avoiding a negative consequence.
And then
benefit to
talking about
themselves.
avoiding a negative consequence, he kind of handed them a possible consequence, and yet left it up to them whether or not that would be necessary in the fact that they wouldn't be able to be each other's partner.
Alex. Okay. What would be a better reaction since he poked you in his leg? Since we go over this, I don't know, 2 or 3 times a week. Tell him to stop. Should you maybe not be partners with him? Like, you did a good job last week asking me to move and go sit in the back. So, do you think it would be fair for you to move, or should we ask Tyrese to move?
Tyrese to move.
Yeah, I think we should ask Tyrese to move. Tyrese, will you move behind DJ, please?
was it?
Okay, so it sounds like a partner choice even, because they are two good friends, they're messing around, and obviously they'd had that conversation before. She's giggling away again.
And she's a little sarcastic. But those obviously are
She's-
high school,
Right.
older kids.
And she has a history with them, and so they've,
So that
that means a lot too.
that banter definitely hinges on a level of trust. So
Right, definitely.
keeping that in mind.
Okay.
All right.
So this leads us into corrective teaching. Corrective teaching is a wonderful thing. When we are looking at corrective teaching and planned teaching are two very similar things. The corrective teaching happens when there's a behavior, so we're trying to find a replacement skill to replace that behavior with. Planned teaching, we think in advance, this is what I want them to do. So with corrective teaching, obviously somebody's had a pretty big mess up, and so you start off using praise or empathy, either just so it's positive. So you start immediately, I really understand how frustrated you are, or can you look at me, wow, I did such a great job looking at me. And then we have to describe the inappropriate behavior. Describing inappropriate behavior is similar to describing what they did correct. And we're going to jump ahead and talk quickly about how to describe those behaviors. Because once again, if you are vague, then they might not understand exactly what it was that you didn't like. So let's quickly talk, or amongst yourselves, we'll divide up the 4 words. And just like we said, what does responsible look like? We're going to be saying, what does aggressive look like? What might that be? So there's 4 words. So how about you 4, and you 3? First 4 we'll take aggressive. You guys can be obnoxious. Wait a minute, I did that wrong. I did it into 3.
I just thought it
So
was
maybe
funny
3.
that
So
they
you
could be
guys be
aggressive
aggressive.
and obnoxious.
You 3 be obnoxious. You 3 do horseplay. And you guys be disrespectful.
What if I don't want it?
There you go. You're good at that.
Sure.
See, it gets more fun as they misbehave because you get to actually do these word choices.
We're being disrespectful.
Yeah, I was gonna try to have a
Woman.
You know what? I have people that do that, and I hate it.
Can't do anything.
Like, don't you call me woman? And they're
Oh, examples.
Oh, you want gummy worms, Callie? You did it.
Yeah, banging the desk.
Being obnoxious.
They can be disrespectful things in their last word.
That's unbehaved.
That's my job.
Hitting each other with a ball at recess.
I don't know how you say nonverbal noises, because that's not it, but you want to say it.
Noises.
Language.
Sound effects. Like not keeping your hands to yourself.
It's like in the lunchroom.
Burping hard.
That one kid, what's his name?
Sorry.
No, that's all right. Crunches his lunch, the water bottles like this.
Yeah, that is.
Obnoxious. It never makes eye contact.
Obnoxious, okay.
Sometimes bones in the bone.
Oh.
He's in your class. She's in.
Callie really wants a video. You followed me all the way around.
Yeah.
Sam Elliott and Grace always
Interrupt you for not letting someone finish their.
So instead of saying,
Oh.
and I don't know if I'm looking at the right 3, you were being really aggressive. What would be a better way to describe being aggressive? What could they have done that you might term aggressive, but we want to be specific with our behaviors?
You said like pushing or shoving or even like verbal, you said verbal abuse.
Okay. So now,
The way you
remember to
yell.
be, you don't want to be vague about verbal abuse, so that would be you said, and then you describe what the verbal abuse is.
The tone that you used when you yelled was aggressive, or.
When you yell those words, yeah.
Yeah.
Sam! So you're obnoxious.
I hate this.
Besides the fact that obnoxious is a little bit of a put down, how would you describe the behavior of what they're doing? If you're snapping your gun, what would be an obnoxious behavior?
Go ahead. Bang in the desk.
Can we do it?
Yep.
Might not put that student next to a desk. Okay,
Remember,
so you're banging your
bumpers.
desk, you're banging your desk against another student's desk.
Repeatedly.
Having a pencil playing inside your desk. Fumbling with something.
Attention me. What does horseplay look like?
We said tripping, pushing, hitting with the ball, or bouncing the ball around. I'm sure there's
Anything they do with a smile, because they're just playing.
Yeah.
We're just playing.
We're just playing.
We're just
Zombies.
When it's wet and going down the hallway.
So then they're like, mine really twist.
Yeah,
That's almost obnoxious.
yeah.
So much overlap.
There is so much overlap. And what does disrespectful look like?
Not listening, unkind word choice, invading other space.
Rude.
Rolling eyes.
Ooh.
Yeah, it's biggie.
I do that
Okay, nice job. I don't know if this will take me back to where I want to be. I think it does.
Thinking in first grade.
I know, it's, I mean.
I actually had a complaint today, she's like, that's
From him?
Sorry, on someone.
Oh, yeah, farting on someone.
It wasn't.
That is just all of the above.
Riley.
That's a boy
Aggressive, disrespectful.
By the way,
It's an art.
everybody, on that note, on the back of your effective praise card is the corrective teaching interaction, so you can look at the steps there. And our next step, after you describe the inappropriate behavior, then you want to describe the appropriate behavior, usually labeling a skill that you want to see. I actually want to go back to, I don't want this one yet. I mean, it would be fine, but I like what they say. So,
We're getting punchy.
when you're describing the appropriate behavior, like getting the teacher's attention, you label the skill, getting the teacher's attention, and you list the specific steps that you're wishing to see. Big part of corrective teaching, giving the reason. Giving the reason is a big deal here, and make it brief and make it meaningful to them. Keep the I out of it. And then as big as giving a reason is practice. Once you've had that corrective teaching, then you need to give them an opportunity to practice. It might be a make-believe opportunity to practice, or it might be a real opportunity to practice. Like, you know what, we're getting ready to do this. This will give you a chance to show me that you understand how to get my attention correct. But you want to do that practice right away. So if there's not going to be a natural way to practice it within the next 5-10 minutes, then just set up an artificial, let's pretend, and just do it really quickly. And then you have an option for a negative consequence. This might be a situation where this child has been struggling with this skill for quite some time. You've kind of set up some consequences in advance. They might be on a point card. They might be in that type of situation. And here they go through it again. We have a nice, good correction. We've practiced, but you know what? You've done this 300 times this day or whatever. So you have earned a little, whatever a natural consequence would be that you've already set up and established. So that's what corrective teaching looks like, and now let's look at what it sounds like.
That normally is, because we've had this conversation twice today, I mean, it doesn't have to be like angry, it can still be nice and happy, but,
Oh, yeah.
because we've,
You'll see an example that you kind of go, huh, and I thought that was such a nice conversation.
And I think if the consequence that you give is a surprise to the student, that's an indication that there should have been some more work up front. Because
Yeah,
the
exactly.
consequence isn't supposed to be a surprise, you want them to know what's gonna happen.
we
Right,
talked about,
right. I
last time
completely
proactively, kind of, the kids should know, what the expectations are and what the possible consequences are, and if they're natural, you know, if there is a natural consequence available, you know, that normally kind of feels the most fair, you know.
So let's read over this corrective teaching, and we're just gonna go right down this side of the room. So if you'll start off by using praise or empathy, and then just follow along and follow along and follow
There's
along.
so many tones in my life.
Oh, it's
I tell you.
Yeah, but have you met Super Tone?
Not yet. That's the one Tom I haven't met. Super Tom, you stayed in your seat.
I'm gonna love you forever.
Okay, hang on a second.
This is important.
I want everybody to really hear it. I love the having fun part, but I do want you to hear it, so let's say Super Tom one more time, and let's try it again.
Super Tom, you stayed in your seat.
When you wanted my attention, you called out my name, snapped your fingers, and yelled something like, "I need some help!"
A better way to get my attention is to raise your hand, wait for me to call on you or come over, and then ask your question or make your comment.
When you get my attention by raising your hand, it lets me know you need some help.
I want you to show me you can get my attention by raising your hand, waiting quietly, and then asking your question. Choose a consequence. Because you did not get my attention appropriately, you will have lost something.
And that's something that, you know, they already know about this. You've set it up ahead of time, it's the expectation, it's not a surprise. Exactly, a clip down, we're doing clip up and down in, I think, first through third grade. Because I do it as part of my language arts class.
Yeah.
And they are so, they do a great job with that. So that's a perfect type of consequence for that.
One thing that you can always use is, because if they didn't do it correctly, it shows me that you don't have that skill yet, and so it tells me that you need some extra time to practice it, and I'm gonna help you with that, so.
Yeah, we're gonna practice for the first 2 minutes of your recess.
Yeah.
I mean, that's, you know, there's skill building, but it is kind of a consequence.
It is a
It's a minute or
consequence,
two, you know, but,
exactly.
you know, we're gonna spend some extra time practicing.
So let's do a corrective teaching down this side of the road, starting here. And this is in a social situation.
I know you would really like to work with your friends.
When I told you, this assignment needed to be completed alone, you said something like, "That's unfair."
When you receive a no answer, remember to look at the person and say, okay, and stay calm. If you disagree, you can come back and talk to them later.
When you accept a no answer by saying okay, you're more likely to hear yes in the future.
So we will talk more about how to accept no after class.
I love the sound of your accent there. Okay, so that's a good example of a social, and let's do an example of an academic behavior. And this time, we're going to start with Maddie, and then anybody who just wants to pipe up.
Okay. You have made,
Wait, we're switching time, sorry.
I'm so excited. Okay. You have made some good points in your essay. In your opening paragraph, you did not state your 3 main ideas.
Remember to mention those ideas in the opening paragraph.
So the reader knows what your essay is about.
Please rewrite your opening paragraph and bring it back to me to review.
In an academic setting. So, notice, could you get a feel for if they were using praise or empathy at the beginning? Good way to start, we're keeping it positive. If you have to make up a way, just ask them to look at you. Usually that's for me anyway, that's usually my first praise. Any questions? You guys are so good at this, your voices sound really good. Okay.
Yeah, guys, I think we're at the point where we're gonna start watching some videos and doing some role playing and practicing, and that's kind of a bigger chunk. Courtney, your face is like, wee! No. That part takes a little longer, so we're gonna go ahead and stop since we're 2 minutes until 7:15.
How about that? It's amazing. I didn't think we'd even come close.
Thank you so much for your time. I thought like a million times over the last 2 weeks that we are so lucky that you're willing to give this time
I am
to do
so
this.
impressed.
It's really
We don't really
exciting.
care what you think.
Yeah, you want to rephrase that?
No, because I incredibly. Oh, I see what you're saying. But you're not misbehaving. I'm giving you a praise.
Okay, I'm waiting for it.
Lou, that was really sure of you to say that.
That
It
you are
seems like
willing
Well,
to
the rest of
spend
us leave
3
at
extra
7:50.
hours of your life. You all have a lot of practice.
Extra practice.
You're gonna have so much fun next Tuesday.
You are.
I'm very excited that I get to be here, because this is my favorite part too.
I might stay home next week.
I'm excited, but
So thank you
Thanks.
so
We're
much
fun
again.
girls.
Use it, practice.
Thanks, Emily,
you know,
for dinner.
We
Yes,
You're
thank you for
welcome.
dinner. You're welcome.
Like
Thanks, Shannon bought dinner tonight.
Oh,
So,
thank her also.
Thanks, Shannon.
Thanks, Shannon.
She's probably still here.
she left. She said she was going to go pay her family some attention. I said that was important.
Are you ready?
Are
you ready?
Can't, no.
Yeah, that's why I've been
My
waiting.
tummy's all
Yeah, I'm
warm.
ready. I'm ready, Mama. I'm ready.
Sam always.
She's been there all
Oh,
this time.
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh,
She came right up to me today after saying hello.
I felt like I was just lost together.
You get a dessert and
She
I
just
joke
gave
you
me
get
one
big
bark
as well.
hello and then